Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's my number 10 team, maybe my 8th ranked team in my 2024 NFL Deep Dive series. Yes, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, do all that YouTube stuff. And why did I say 10th or maybe 8th? It's because as of this recording, I don't know if Brandon Aiyuk is a 49er or a Steeler. They've been sort of playing hokey pokey with the Brandon Aiyuk trade. Now, I have accounted in this video, I will account for whether Brandon Aiyuk does perhaps end up being a 49er before the season begins or even slightly before this video gets released. I wanted to try to be as up to date as possible, at least with this grading, to reflect both options. The current option without him, which makes them 10th, and the option with him, which actually would bump them up to 8th. So you are going to explore that with me here. And now let's talk about the actual team that they have as of right now that I can confirm that they have 100%, and that's without Brandon Aiyuk. One of the most intriguing rosters in the entire league. They really, on defense especially, don't really have weaknesses. And if they do have a weakness, it's really a weakness that you look at as just initially going to be a problem, and that by the end of the year could potentially be viewed as another strength somehow, where it's all a giant strength. The offense is a little bit more complicated. They have two brand new quarterbacks, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Two quarterbacks with a lot of question marks surrounding them. One a veteran, one a young player. Two completely different abilities of what they can contribute to a team, with a brand new offensive coordinator in Arthur Smith coming over from his stint as head coach at the Atlanta Falcons. There's a lot of memes surrounding him and the type of players that he uses, but I do like the fit, especially of Justin Fields being in this offense. But I do think Russell Wilson has the higher upside. We'll get to that as well. It's all under the umbrella of a Hall of Fame level coach, Mike Tomlin. One of the best coaches of all time. He has just continuously been a fantastic head coach, creating, more like maintaining the high-level, winning, hard-nosed Steeler culture, quickly identifying issues within the roster of players that don't fit, even though if they are great players, and getting them out of there as soon as they can before he truly affects the team. That's why this team hasn't had a losing record under Mike Tomlin. It's an amazing feat to witness. It's been like 23 straight years now overall that they haven't had a losing season. They've had a lot of success, and with rosters that haven't even really been that impressive on either side of the ball at times. And that says a lot about Mike Tomlin's ability. It says a lot about the overall front office, as well as the Pittsburgh Steelers, that they've been able to commit to coaches and the way that they have, and to give them time. And I think that having just a little bit more patience will be the theme of this team this year. You know, when it comes to some of the position groups on the offensive side of the ball, especially in some of the individual players on the offensive side of the ball, patience may be the key word for Steelers fans out there. And let's get to what I think of the overall coaching staff to start. So this is my third ranked coaching staff here. They got first ballot Hall of Famer Mike Tomlin as their head coach. They've hit home runs, man, with these head coaches. I can't stress it enough how important it is to have had the success at the head coaching position that they've had. You know, 3 head coaches since the 70s. You know, and people are talking about Tomlin not, getting them to true success outside of the one Super Bowl. But what are the odds that you're going to land another coach of his quality? I don't think it's out there. I think a lot of some of the people calling for Tomlin to maybe, for them to move on from him, it's just not a thing that should be happening at all. He's still, I think, by my estimation, the third best coach in the entire league right now. And what he does is he always gives your team a chance. He's one of those few coaches that just can't have a losing season. It just doesn't happen for him, and it's never happened for him. And now that he's got a very well-rounded roster in a lot of ways, with really just trying to figure out who his quarterback is, this is opening up for them to get back to that spot where the Steelers are a threat every single year, where they're a top team every single year. He's changed up his entire offensive philosophy, bringing in Arthur Smith. This is going back to like some old school style Steelers football where they're going to focus a lot on what's going on with the backfield. You know, Arthur Smith comes in. He's my 8th ranked offensive coordinator. It just didn't work out for him as a head coach. He's one of those guys who I talk about guys like that all the time, like a Josh McDaniels, where it just doesn't work for them as head coaches. But when they're coordinators and all they have to do is focus on the offensive scheme and they can run it by maybe a head coach who can oversee everything. This is the best head coach Arthur Smith has ever worked with as an offensive coordinator by far. So to have Tomlin, who understands the culture, who understands how to win, who understands how to position things, who understands how to get the best out of players, to have him and Arthur Smith now working together, have him overseeing Arthur Smith and being that the thumbs up, thumbs down guy, you know, the veto guy for the offense. I think Arthur Smith's offense will take off, especially because they got some really good personnel that really suits that offense. You know, they got a nice deep backfield, which Arthur Smith likes. They got a nice variety of different wide receiver types. Some guys on the smaller side too, which, you know, create all that speed out on the field. He's got a good receiving tight end. He's got I would say a high upside wide receiver. And like I said at the beginning, they might actually have Brandon Aiyuk by the time this video drops. So great hire to bring him in and use that offensive mind to potentially elevate Justin Fields, who people were talking about having Justin Fields in Atlanta as the quarterback for Arthur Smith. So, you know, even though the competition is between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, there might be a long-term solution here for Justin Fields to finally get over the top with this style of offense. It'll be interesting to see how camp continues and how they get into the season. Terrell Austin is their defensive coordinator. He's been around. You see him pop up with Tomlin for the last couple of years on the Steelers staff. He's my 12th ranked defensive coordinator. You know, it's a cluster, but I think that Tomlin overall is going to elevate the defense more than anything. You know, he improved the Steelers from 29th to, I believe it was like first when he first came in 2022, like throughout that year, from when he took over to how the season finished. You know, he's been with the Cleveland Browns, you know, for a while. He's got this specialty in secondary, which I think is going to be really good long-term for Joey Porter Jr. in particular, who they're hoping, just, I think based upon how the roster's been built, that he's going to come on and be that number one corner for them this year and play a little more consistent ball. It's just, overall, this is a really good foundational staff here. It's the third best in the entire league. You look at some of the positional coaches here. You know, they have Aaron Curry, who's the inside linebackers coach. You recognize his name from out there. Danny Smith is their special teams coordinator. It's his 11th season with Tomlin as the special teams coordinator. Not a whole lot of big-time names are popping out when you look at their staff. You know, Carl Dunbar, the defensive line coach, I think would be one. He's got all this world's experience. I think he's been with the Pittsburgh Steelers for a long time, too. I think he might have been tenured there for a long time. 6 years, 17th in the entire league for his experience. On the offensive side, no one is really popping out here. So it'll be interesting to see how each position group develops. You know, there's some really young coaches in there, like Tom Arth, the quarterback's coach, is only in his second year. They do have Alfredo Roberts, 20 years experience as a tight end coach. Pat Meyer, 11 years offensive line coach. But then, you know, assistant offensive line coach Isaac Williams, 2 years. Mike Sullivan, senior offensive assistant, has 20 years of experience. Offensive assistant. There are a bunch of offensive assistants in here. Cam Bowie, 3 years. Baker's first year. Zach Azani, seventh year in the league. He's got a lot of work ahead of him too in this. You know, they got rid of Deontay Johnson, who just didn't fit everything here. And now he's got George Pickens, he's got Rowan Wilson, he's got Calvin Austin, and potentially Brandon Aiyuk. So he's going to have to really put all those guys together and get them prepared for this Arthur Smith offense That does have the potential here. I do think that this is the perfect situation for an Arthur Smith offense to be in. It really worked well in Tennessee with a style from Mike Vrabel. With Derrick Henry back there, and it was the style of football that Vrabel wanted to play. It's a style of football that Vrabel understood, and Arthur Smith got a head coaching job off of it. So I expect very, very similar results here with Pittsburgh, with Mike Tomlin, because Mike Tomlin does have that old school, hard-nosed approach about how to win football games. It's just a great staff. I really love it. Now let's get to the quarterbacks, and they are tied for 20th here. Russell Wilson gets an 82 grade. Justin Fields there as the backup gets a 73 grade. Russell Wilson, that first year in Denver with Nathaniel Hackett, that was just a disaster waiting to happen. Denver didn't even want him. They felt they needed to make a big move at quarterback, so they picked him when they couldn't get Aaron Rodgers. It was very obvious they were trying to get Aaron Rodgers there. And they ended up giving up an absurd amount of capital to get Russell Wilson. It never worked out with Hackett. Sean Payton tried to make it work. You did see some success from Russell Wilson towards the end of the year. After that beating they took from the Dolphins, I feel like that was a time where that team really settled in. And Russell Wilson did in particular, where he actually didn't have that bad of a statistical output. He wasn't this giant liability like he was that first year in Denver, and frankly, the last half of his season is that last year in Seattle. He looked like he was getting back to being, like, maybe could get into that top 15 quarterback conversation. So, putting him here at 20th, it's kind of like, okay, he's switching over. There is a direct quarterback competition going on here. There really isn't a whole lot Pittsburgh has invested in Russell Wilson because of the situation with Denver and them releasing him. So it's he's on a much shorter leash. There's not this big financial commitment to him where Pittsburgh will feel bad about benching him, especially when you got Justin Fields there, who they acquired to, compete, to be a backup, to maybe be somebody who can be the future of the team. Find packages for him out there, because if they do switch to Justin Fields, they do drop to about, I think it's 29th or 30th in the league for quarterbacks. But they would jump up to third best quarterback run threat, which would dramatically enhance their run game. Which is why this Arthur Smith combination is really intriguing here. Because, Russell Wilson's still a great athlete. He can still move around the pocket. He can still get outside the pocket and extend plays. But he's nowhere near that level of Justin Fields. What Russell Wilson has on Fields is the throwing ability, is the ability to read a defense. Now, for a year and a half in Denver, he looked like he couldn't read a defense to save his life. And it wasn't only until he settled in there that he did look like he was finally getting comfortable. Now, it's another system. Like a fourth system in 4 years for Russell Wilson. That's a lot to go through, especially because in Seattle, he did have so much stability there. So there is a whole lot that he can apply from those years, but it's the constant change that's happening can be rough on really anyone. Even a veteran quarterback, especially one that's kind of, looking to rebuild his confidence maybe. You want to give him something that he's really, really comfortable in, so he doesn't get in these situations where even he might not know what's happening, where he's trying to figure out what the offense is trying to accomplish, what a certain call is, what a certain terminology is. So how him and Arthur Smith mix together here is going to be what makes or breaks this team, really. This is the make or break position group for this team, because as we get into the other ones, you'll see they really are kind of built for what Arthur Smith wants to do. It really sets things up really nicely. Justin Fields, if he comes in, you do get a chance to develop him as a passer in an offensive system that does particularly suit him. And to have him back there with the running backs and to create what frankly would become like a top 10 running attack in the entire NFL, top 5 maybe even, with him and Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, even some of the other backups that they have, even with guys like Calvin Austin you can use as a gadget player. That would really create a very fast-paced, creative rushing offense, but not a lot of upside in the passing, which I think they still need to create that upside in the passing, which is why there's all this talk about Brandon Aiyuk right now. And I think that when you have Russell Wilson, I think there's that part of them that went, we got no money invested in him. He showed at the end of the year, last year, that he could be that Russell Wilson of old. So let's just go with him and see how it goes. And I think that this is also a very patient and disciplined coaching staff as well. And you saw how much Mike Tomlin was able to get out of really lesser talents than Russell Wilson. Frankly, lesser talents than Justin Fields. And they're pulling out winning records. So that's why I have them ranked this high, is because there's just no way with someone with the experience of Russell Wilson and with the great, offensive coaching staff they've put together and the solid, roster of defensive players that are surely going to be just a top 10 defense probably yet again. This is a 9-10 win team minimum, as it has been since Mike Tomlin took over. I'm very excited about what Russell Wilson can accomplish. You want that offensive line to grow. And we'll get to those grades. They've invested a lot in the offensive line, in particular the last couple of years. So that's going to be something to watch for Wilson as well, because if the offensive line breaks down, that's when Russell Wilson, I think, does become less appealing to this team as a starting quarterback, because you're going to want then to have the athleticism of Justin Fields to create a numbers advantage out during the rushing attack, really execute a play action pass, move the pocket around. You're going to open up a lot more opportunities in that sense. So I think the offensive line also in Russell Wilson's playing time as the season goes on, I think they'll be inevitably linked together more so than you'll see, I think, from most other teams when it comes to their current starting quarterback and, frankly, the better passer of their quarterback room. So now we get to the running back room itself. They are tied for 25th. There's good depth here, though. They have a good little mixture here between these two backs of Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. I think you're going to see a lot of Najee Harris on early downs, but I think them not picking up the fifth-year option, which I believe is something that did happen, I don't necessarily foresee Najee Harris being overly featured. At least he'll be featured on early downs, but Jaylen Warren, I think, is the guy that just better suits what Arthur Smith maybe will want to accomplish. You saw a lot of that in what he did with Bijan Robinson just last year. And I could see, Najee Harris sort of falling into that Tyler Algier role where, Algier did have a great rookie year under Arthur Smith, but he was very quick to go get the more well-rounded running back in Bijan Robinson, the more upside running back for modern NFL play in Bijan. So I think he'll be more enamored inevitably with Jaylen Warren, especially with Najee Harris probably not being on this team come next season. He also brought in Cordarrelle Patterson, who under him in Atlanta had that gigantic breakout season. Hasn't really been able to match it, but he's somebody who can come in. He can do everything in this offense. He's a reliable source for this offense. He's good for the running back room in general. Going to be good in the huddle, especially probably really help out in this training camp, getting these running backs up to speed, getting the offensive line up to speed. Those little, like that coach on the field, that coach in the huddle type of a thing. I think Cordarrelle Patterson can bring that. His versatility as well. Arthur Smith created a whole different position for him on a depth chart, and I expect him to maybe get a little bit more action. I'd say especially probably early in the season, as again they're all settling into live action, real gameplay in this offense. Daijun Edwards was a rookie. I actually like him as being like a third early down guy. I actually really like that option. Aaron Shampkin, I don't know who they're going to keep as a fifth running back. If they are going to keep a fifth running back, I kind of doubt that they will. Because even when you get into the receiving threats here, Jaylen Warren comes in as the 9th best receiving back in the league. And this is why I really think that he's going to get all that playing time. Because he really is fitting in as that Bijan Robinson role in this offense. Not taking anything away really from Najee Harris, who's serviceable in that role. He's better than some of the starters you'll see on other teams. Cordarrelle Patterson's got that veteran presence again. He's sort of just running back 3 overall for me in this offense. Daijun Edwards isn't going to give you much in the receiving game. But this is where Jaylen Warren, I think, is really going to... I think he's almost set up to be really great this year, even if they end up with Justin Fields at the quarterback spot, because this will open up like a short, quick passing game. You know, that those read options that Justin Fields can dominate a game with if, you know, run consistently and he's got some weapons out there that can perform around him. And this is what I think is going to inevitably get it as well, because it is a passing league. This is a league where, especially based upon, again, who they're trying to add to their roster, they want to be a team that does throw the ball. They don't want to be a team that just runs the ball. They want to be very capable of doing it. They want to have the variety like they have in Harrison Warren. But I could really see Najee Harris just slowly, as the season goes along, continuously getting less and less snaps in favor of Jaylen Warren to open up the offense a little bit in every given situation, to make the defense think a little bit more, not be so predictable in what they're doing based upon personnel. And also with Jaylen Warren being able to maybe develop into being a better early down back than Najee Harris is this year. This is a tough spot for Najee Harris in general, just because he doesn't have the receiving back chops of Jaylen Warren. He's not got any long-term years on his contract or any real money invested in him going forward. He could very well be a trade deadline candidate for a team that, you know, maybe looking for a running back late in the year. I'm thinking about Dallas maybe, for example, could be one of those teams that feels like they just need to add a running back, add a consistent runner in the backfield, an early down threat that could really help them out, especially if Ezekiel Elliott, you know, starts to slow down at that point, you know, just due to age and wear and tear. Maybe that's something that they go about and do. Maybe there's a surprise team out there that will want to add Najee Harris, you know, throw a 4th, 5th round pick at Pittsburgh, get Najee Harris, and then maybe extend him. Maybe they're willing to give a 5th round pick to get that extra jump on signing him with free agency coming up next year. You can look at a team, you know, the New York Giants. My New York Giants I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. You know, just try to think of teams off the top of my head here. You know, even maybe, you know, is Denver an option for that? Are the Chargers an option for that? You know, how, like, if they pick up some injuries there with Dobbins and Gus Edwards, what are they going to look like? So it'll be interesting to see what the journey of Najee Harris is. But if they do keep this group together, I think that they will outperform the tied for 25th overall grade, just because as a duo, I think they'd be a really good combination working with Arthur Smith. And then Jaylen Warren adds in this receiving ability. I think it creates a much more well-rounded, you know, in-game situation rather than just this on paper overall talent level. So we're going to start with the weapons here, and we're going to go on with first without Brandon Aiyuk. Brandon Aiyuk is not officially on this team as of this recording. So we're going to start with this, and then we will finish with what they will look like if they do acquire Brandon Aiyuk. Currently, they're the 28th wide receiver group, with George Pickens as their 1, rookie Roman Wilson as the 2, Calvin Austin mixing in there as their number 3. And I do believe that this is the 3 that would get the most snaps, that would get the most opportunities. I think, you know, as Roman Wilson, you know, heals up for the beginning of the year, I just think that this would be what the group would look like. I think Van Jefferson is somebody you can get in as a bigger body guy. But I think that it will be built around George Pickens. And it'll be interesting to see how George Pickens now performs without Deontay Johnson there. There was, and I said it in my Steelers offseason prediction video. I was saying it in mock drafts leading up to the end of the season into the draft cycle, that I didn't think George Pickens and Deontay Johnson would both be on this team come this season. And I was correct. I thought Deontay Johnson would be the one that would get traded just because of the financial situation that it would open up for them. And I was right. And I was told that I was being maybe, you know, ridiculous. And I'll just take that as a W for me. And it's because they just weren't what you would expect from a Tomlin run team. they were very selfish players. It was like this. It was like with Chase Claypool when they got rid of him because he had that attitude. It's like they've had this run of receivers where they have this ego on them that is almost unbecoming, and that it almost holds back what their overall potential as players and contributors could be. And we saw it with Chase Claypool. They got rid of him. Deontay Johnson and George Pickens were like Dumb and Dumber together so many times out there. Not willing to block, not putting out any effort unless they knew for sure they were getting the ball, making really bonehead, immature decisions during games and during plays, on the bench, during practice, during training camp. It wasn't the disciplined Steelers football you would expect. So they get rid of Deontay Johnson. Great move. We're able to improve their cornerback room in the process with Dante Jackson. We'll get to that. So I thought it was a really good decision, a really smart move, because now George Pickens is sort of there, and they're gonna boost him up, and they're gonna say you need to perform, and especially with them going out and getting Brandon Aiyuk potentially, that's also a message to George Pickens. Now, I don't think George Pickens gets traded in the Brandon Aiyuk trade. I don't think that's something that they would do, just because he does have to get paid, and I think that he would in turn have the 49ers sort of by the short hairs there a bit. And I don't think the 49ers are necessarily looking to add an expensive wide receiver if they're not going to retain an expensive wide receiver that they're trading away. But George Pickens, man, statistically, and he'll make amazing plays, amazing catches, have amazing games. It's just the mental, it's the maturity issue that I think holds him back from being an even bigger star and for this team to have even more success. So he's going to be the one to watch this year, just the maturity level and what it's like being really the big dog now in the room with Deontay Johnson gone. They do have Van Jefferson, who's going to be another outside wide receiver. Scotty Miller is going to be brought in. It seems to be like a backup slot receiver. Quez Watkins, is never really broken out. Des Fitzpatrick, Jacob Copeland, Jerry, they have these mix of guys. I think they'll keep the 6 guys. I would say maybe 7 if Aiyuk comes in. I think that Quez Watkins and Des Fitzpatrick, even though I rank Copeland ahead of Des, I think those two will be the ones fighting for that roster spot in all this. You look at the tight end room here with Pat Freiermuth. He's the 18th ranked tight end for me. Michael Pruitt comes over from Atlanta with Arthur Smith. That's a very interesting, because Michael Pruitt, you go look at his grading in, on PFF. He was great. He played really good ball when given the opportunity. Just the overall upside, the longevity of the upside. I think he comes in, he's a great number 2 to Pat Freiermuth potentially. I like Darnell Washington, has to drastically improve in the receiving game. He is almost like that 6th offensive lineman, though. I still think he does have a role in this offense. Connor Hayward is like this H-back. He'll be in fullback. You'll see him in motion. I think you could see a lot of Hayward and Washington on the field at the same time. They can go to some of those bigger sets out there. And the other thing, really, when you look at Pruitt, you look at Hayward, you look at Washington, there's this meme going around about Arthur Smith where he's like, I know I got this real starting tight end, this great overall tight end, but man, have you seen tight end 4? We got to get him on the field. We got to get him some touches. And so that's really opening up a lot of opportunities for a lot of these guys. It's really hard to call which one of these tight ends is really going to be the true star of this room. It could be Darnell Washington. The size and him being able to work in the run game and then work off the play action and work in the red zone. That might be something that Arthur Smith finds extremely appealing and might use him to death more than he uses a guy like Pat Freiermuth in the red zone. That was a big criticism that Falcons fans had of him not using Kyle Pitts like that. Kyle Pitts still had some good years, but it was never what you would expect from a guy with his skill set, and it's because Arthur Smith was out there with Jonnu Smith, with Michael Pruitt, with Kaderil Hodge. It was just a weird situation based upon the talent level. So Arthur Smith isn't necessarily married to constantly getting the ball to the quote-unquote best player on the team. He's going to design a scheme based upon specific traits that players have and execute an offense that way. And he's had a lot of success doing things that way. This is just going to be really interesting. And I'd almost want to hold back a bit if I'm, a fantasy player on getting Pat Freiermuth. That's another reason why I kind of rank him a little bit lower, is because there's not a lot of faith here that the guy that should be the true number one tight end is going to get used in that way by Arthur Smith. Still a really good player, but they really, even with these guys, they're still just missing that like one thing that they're just missing it. And the way you get it is with Brandon Aiyuk. So this is what they would look like with Brandon Aiyuk on the team. They jump from the 28th ranked wide receiver room to the 5th ranked wide receiver room in the NFL. That is a tremendous jump. You're getting one of the best wide receivers in the league here in Brandon Aiyuk. He, by my estimation, is a top 10 wide receiver going into this season easily. You bring him in. Now George Pickens becomes a high-end number 2 wide receiver. You get a high-end number 1 receiver. Now Roman Wilson becomes like your wide receiver 3. He becomes like this pretty high-end wide receiver 3 as well. Now, again, I don't expect George Pickens to be the one that would get traded here. Now, I'm going to say all this and watch him be the one that gets traded for Brandon Aiyuk by the time I release this video. Silly me. But if he does get part of the trade with Brandon Aiyuk, then there's still, I think, the 12th or 13th wide receiver room at that point. So it's still a significant jump up for this wide receiver room by just adding this top level player. It does drop the 49ers down, allowing them to move up a lot too. But I think when you add Brandon Aiyuk, he's a great all-around receiver. So he would really complement everyone really well here. And I think it would open up more opportunities for George Pickens. That with Deontay Johnson, I don't necessarily believe Deontay Johnson was drawing all that much attention away from George Pickens. I would even argue that George Pickens was still viewed as wide receiver 1 by opposing defenses and defensive coordinators in the week leading up to the game. There would be no question here that Brandon Aiyuk is wide receiver 1. So all the coverages would get rolled to his side, and George Pickens would be in tremendous situations going one-on-one with a lot of guys. So that is the significant change in what we'd see from this wide receiver room by just that one little move. Going over to the offensive line, and the pass blocking is going to be 27th in the league. They are going to be starting 2 rookies, especially with Herbigs being put onto the injured reserve just, I believe, today as of this filming earlier this afternoon. Zach Frazier is for sure now going to be the starter. Now, I projected Zach Frazier being the starter by week 1 anyway. I think that if he wasn't in week 1, I think by really early in the year he would be. I think he's a really good player. So him being your starting center, I think we got 2 really good veterans next to him, Siamalu and James Daniels. James Daniels hasn't really lived up to that contract, hasn't lived up to the hype since leaving Chicago. Be interesting to see how he can boost his way forward. Then they have Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu, who one of them will be left tackle, one of them will be right tackle. How they go about determining that, I've seen sometimes the depth chart had Fautanu at left tackle. I think the most updated one had him at right tackle. So, whichever side you want to put him on that side. They'll figure out what's the best overall selection, I'm sure, by week 1. And we may see them switch at some point in the season as well. Fautanu comes into this team. I saw him as he got a lot of the Zach Martin comparisons where it's he's a tackle, but maybe he's just a guard. And him coming to Pittsburgh, I think that established him as the tackle. It solidified that tackle spot. Had he gone to another team, maybe like a Cincinnati, I think that might have opened up for him to have gone to guard. I think you might have ended up with a really early all-pro guard. So I still think you get a high-end tackle. He still needs to develop a little bit in certain aspects of his game. Obviously, he is a rookie. Broderick Jones, hard to judge a rookie offensive lineman after putting over 2 rookies just now. So it'll be interesting to see. He did need some work coming into the league. He was that upside tackle, but not an immediate impact. So he needs to step up his game, but he also needs to settle into his position. He goes up against some really, really tough pass rushes just within the division alone. So I think the learning curve is a little bit more, but I think when it comes along, it's going to come pretty drastically and pretty quick, just based on the competition he's facing. In terms of the depth, not a whole lot to be excited about, especially with Herbig out. Herbig as a pass blocker wasn't anything. It's his run blocking that we really would have coveted. Mason McCormick is a really good rookie. I like him as like a 4th interior offensive lineman, competing. I think he can end up eventually by the end of the year, maybe stealing some reps from one of the guards if one of those guards end up struggling. I think he's a good rookie that they just brought in. I guess Spencer Anderson is maybe your, backup center, I guess. I don't know. Dan Moore is your swing tackle. Not very good. He had to be replaced. After that rookie year, Dan Moore was nothing. He surprised a lot of people with a good rookie year, and he's gone. I think they're really regretting getting rid of Kevin Dotson, who had that breakout year last year after they traded him to the Rams. He would have been really valuable on this offensive line, really improved it drastically. You get to the run blocking, and they're 27th again. Siamalu, really, really high quality interior run blocker. Broderick Jones, a little bit better there. Daniels is what he is. Zach Frazier, a little bit lower on the list. Fautanu, not good. This is not part of what his game is. He does have all these great athletic traits, though, where with some really good coaching, I think throughout the year he can drastically outplay this grade. But I do think that's where we're going to see some growing pains from him early on in the season. Going back to the center, Zach Frazier, he sort of gets thrown in here. Maybe he wasn't all that ready because I really like Nate Herbig as a run blocker. So, Now, Dan Moore as a run blocker is better than Troy Fautanu. Is there a world where Dan Moore becomes the starting tackle again and Fautanu kicks into guard? I don't know that possibility is all that high. I would say that possibility gets a lot more realistic in the event that Justin Fields becomes a starting quarterback and the shift of focus in the offense becomes a lot more based upon the running game than the passing game. I think that is really the only instance in which I could see that shift happening. But I also think that their focus is going to be more the long-term development of Troy Fautanu and keeping him at that tackle spot. So I think they'll just sort of take their lumps with him there, even if that switch does happen. If that switch does happen, I would also maybe look for Mason McCormick to have a real opportunity to slip in there as well. That's something I would watch for. Maybe if you get some struggles from Zach Frazier, maybe James Daniels kicks into center. He did play center for a while there in Chicago. And then maybe McCormick ends up playing one of the guard spots and you get maybe some higher upside at your guard position while taking a bit of a hit at the center position. I think you might be more willing to take the hit at the center position than at the guard position. I don't know. Maybe some teams would, other teams wouldn't. I think you make up for maybe some upside deficiencies with the experience level of James Daniels. Maybe that helps in that scenario, but that's all sort of up in the air. I think that's going to be in-season moves that they make, but overall this is still a bottom 5 offensive line they've thrown so many assets at it though. Fautanu, Siamalu, Frazier, Broderick Jones, James Daniels, Mason McCormick. These are all guys who I don't think they've been on the team longer than 3 years. I think James Daniels is going into his 3rd year now with the team. Siamalu's in his 2nd year. Broderick Jones is in his second year, and then Fautanu, Frazier, and McCormick are all rookies. So they're not afraid to throw assets at this offensive line. So at some point, some of these guys are going to start to hit, and this will end up being like that upper half of the league offensive line, I think, at worst. It's just a matter of them getting there and finding the right combination of players. So overall, this offense is tied for 27th. They have the 31st run offense here, tied for 23rd in pass offense. Again, the offensive line, as they develop, I think that's really going to be the thing that raises everything up. Now, add Brandon Aiyuk. This becomes the 17th ranked pass offense and the 25th overall offense. It does change things a little bit. Big boost to the pass offense, and then a slight boost to the overall offensive projection, but it does bump them into it bumps them a tier up. It bumps them into a cluster of teams whose overall offense is on like a next level type of a thing. So it really creates a much larger range for success for them as an overall offense. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, and this is where the stars of this team really are. We'll start with the edge room. They're tied for second here. TJ Watt, what can you say? He's a top 2, top 3 at worst edge player in the NFL when he's healthy. Really great overall play. He plays great in the pass game, really good in the run game. Alex Highsmith, I'll take the L on Alex Highsmith. He's really done a great job to become a high-end number 2. On a lot of teams, he's a number 1. Even when TJ Watt is out, this guy has performed consistently great. I was wrong about him. Nick Herbig is going to be a great number 3 on this team. He's a really good rotational option for them. But these two are just the stars. They do everything great. They're a great complement to one another. And they have such an ability. You know, you'll see TJ Watt sort of retreat and drop into coverage. And Alex Highsmith now becomes your number 1 pass rusher on that play. And he'll beat the left tackle, and he'll beat a double team. He'll overcome a chip from a running back or a tight end. Really great. And then TJ Watt will be there. You're expecting him to rush. He'll take that step back. They'll throw it. He'll bat the ball in the air, and he'll intercept it. We've seen that a number of times. TJ Watt pull that play off. So his versatility, even though 90% of the time you're going to use him obviously as somebody just go get the damn quarterback, having that versatility somehow puts an offense and puts a quarterback in a position where he still does have to kind of consider the fact that TJ Watt might take 2 steps forward and then bail back, and he's got all the athleticism to cut off a little stick route from a tight end, and then he's taking that ball the other way. So you somehow have this dual threat, even though, like I said, he's mostly just going after the quarterback. They do have some depth guys in there. Johnson, Moon, Windman, Welshoff. I mean, you hope that you never have to see him. You know, I think most of the time you're going to see Watt and Highsmith, and then you'll see Nick Herbig mixed in there, especially here in these true passing situations. Even when you get to the edge against the run, they're tied for third. TJ Watt, one of the best edge players against the run. Alex Highsmith, a high-end number 2. You know, he's a again, like I said, he's a number 1 edge rusher on a lot of other teams in the league. You know, short of it being playing with Myles Garrett or Micah Parsons or Nick Bosa, you're hard pressed to find somebody who can play at the level that Alex Highsmith has shown that he can play at. And again, you get Nick Herbig, who I think this will be a situation where you'll see Herbig. I think early downs is where you're going to see Herbig the most. And that's when you'll see like the rotation of Watt and Highsmith, depending on what the situation is in the game. Jeremiah Moon, I think he does make the team as the 4th edge player just because of his ability here on early downs. Again, you want to get, when you have these high-end edge rushers, you almost want to get backups that you can trust to come in and play on early downs. as that rotational player to play against true running situations, just to give these guys a break, because you do need to give them a break at some point in time. You can't run them like Okereke and McKinney did last year and play them 100% of the snaps. Just not how the position works. So I think that is going to be the deciding factor for Jeremiah Moon making the team. You get to the interior guys. The interior rush, they're tied for 15th. Keanu Benton going into his second year, great breakout player last year. I think if Kobe Turner wasn't as great as he was, I think people would be talking a whole lot more about Keanu Benton. He was great last year. And a great compliment to the veteran Cam Hayward, who just can't seem to retire, but he's not somebody who necessarily has the skill set of somebody that should retire. I really like him, Benton stepping up the way he did, I think allows Hayward to sort of settle back in to a role that I think better suits his age and his stamina and the wear and tear that he's had in his career, where he's been he's a Steelers legend. But this opens up opportunities. I think Montravius Adams is a good third option here on these passing situations. They got these like 3-4 defensive end types in here, like Lowry and DeMarvin Leal. I just, I don't know. I never really liked Dean Lowry at all. DeMarvin Leal just came into that last year in college with a top 10 projection and just never lived up to it. Ogunjobi is just this nose tackle that you're going to throw in there. I think he's more of a backup to Keanu Benton, who got some nose tackle play last year. When you move to them against the run, they do bump up to 12th. Cam Hayward, I think, has become a lot better against the run. Just the demand of the athleticism of playing an interior pass rusher, I think, hurts him as he gets older. Benton does take a little bit of a step back in that play, but I think it all ends up evening out. I really like the rookie Logan Lee to be an early down defensive lineman, especially when they're playing 3 interior defensive linemen, that 3-4 base formation. I like Logan Lee, Cam Hayward, and Keanu Benton to be that group out there. And then Ogunjobi and Adams are sort of your backups then to complete that rotation. Dean Lowry, Loudermilk, Slade, I'm not the biggest fans of any of them. I don't know. I wouldn't personally keep them on the team. I think keeping 5 interior defensive linemen is probably in their best interest. And then, you can always pick one up off the street, need be, if you pick up an injury or something. But overall, this front 4, it's up there with some of the best in the entire league. It really drives this defense. It makes everyone around them better. It's going to drastically help out a cornerback room that when we get to that, you'll see that there's a lot of questions behind it. It's one of those rooms that needs just more time, sort of like, the offensive line does. But this really makes up for those deficiencies in a huge way by having such high quality here. Moving on to the linebackers, in pass coverage, they are tied for 8th. You have Patrick Queen and the rookie Peyton Wilson. I really like these two being the linebackers on these passing situations. Patrick Queen had that breakout year playing next to Roquan Smith, made it impossible for Baltimore to keep him. He goes to the hated rivals, Pittsburgh Steelers. A real petty move, if you ask me. Ballsy move, to be honest. How he settles in as being a true number 1 linebacker is still yet to be determined, because when he was a true number 1 linebacker, the Ravens felt so strongly that they needed somebody else that they went and they got Roquan Smith for a 2nd-round pick and then paid him record-breaking money. So it's difficult to be that high on Patrick Queen, especially on early downs, which I still think he needs a lot of work on. But I do think he is more likely than not the green dot linebacker as Peyton Wilson sort of develops, even though I think Peyton Wilson in coverage is your 2nd best option. You got a Landon Roberts who's right there creeping up with him. And then when you get into the linebackers against the run, they're tied for 14th. I do like Peyton Wilson just slightly better than a Landon Roberts in both aspects of the game. But I do think his inexperience will cause him to sort of slip down the depth chart maybe, especially early in the year. And Queen and Roberts will be the guys But I do think that he will get playing time. He will get the third most, especially with Cole Holcomb now out. He's on the PUP list. You get Peyton Wilson. I think he'll sort of settle in as your rotational linebacker and end up with a lot of snaps because he'll be able to be going in a lot of different situations. On early downs, he'll go in for Patrick Queen. And in passing situations, if they want to play two linebackers out there, he'll go in for Landon Roberts in that situation. So it could really work out where he ends up getting probably the second most snaps of all the linebackers on the team by the end of the year. If he gets used in that way, Mark Robinson can always be an option to come in on early downs as well. I think that they drafted Peyton Wilson for a reason. He's coming in. He's going to be like a long-term answer along with Patrick Queen. So I think they're going to want to integrate him in, and he'll get more and more playing time as the season goes on. I think he's a really good player. Landon Roberts is your veteran in the room also. Almost settling as more like a traditional linebacker, which I think they really like. So that'll be something to watch as well. Moving on to the defensive backs, and we'll start with the corners. This is the 30th ranked cornerback room. Joey Porter Jr. had an up and down rookie year, showed a lot of promise, had some really great moments, had the expected issues during his rookie campaign that you would expect. But you hope that those have now been cleaned up, and especially with Tyrell Austin as defensive coordinator, the defensive back specialist, that he's going to have a jump in quality here. You're hoping for like that Derek Stingley jump from year 1 to year 2. Especially with all the help he's going to be getting from the front 4, front 7 in front of him in pass coverage. He's going to have a lot of opportunities to play really instinctual, especially, again, with the guys on the back end that we'll get to very shortly. Dante Jackson is the one that came over for the Deontay Johnson in that trade. He's going to settle in as like the number 2 corner here. Lots of speed. So he, I think, is going to have an opportunity to sort of get back to that level where people were talking about him like he was, a top 15 cornerback in the NFL for a while there. Sort of just disappeared in Carolina because of injuries and them adding a bunch of guys. And he was almost like a constant there, but it never really got back to where that projection was for that 1 year. He sort of just kept sliding out of view for everyone. So how he can come back onto the scene here is really take advantage of the same things that you hope Joey Porter takes advantage of, which is a great front 4 that's going to open up a lot of opportunities for him to play instinctual. And when he's got that speed out there, if he's able to play really instinctual ball, his athleticism is really going to be a tremendous asset for this defense and forcing turnovers especially. The problem that they really have is who's the third corner here. You got Thomas Graham. You got Beanie Bishop, the rookie. You got Keandre Thomas. You got Darius. One of these guys, there's really no settled cornerback 3 here, which is a concern because a lot of teams are playing with 3 corners on the field at once. 3 corners, 2 safeties, 2 linebackers, and then a front 4. That's almost the standard NFL defense now most of the time. That nickel sub package. They are going to be throwing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're throwing like 7 guys at this issue, this third cornerback issue, and just need one of them to hit. So one of them better, and you almost assume that one of them would. I think it's between the rookie Beanie Bishop and the veteran Thomas Graham more so than anybody else. I think Darius Rush could maybe slip in there as an option. Corey Trice maybe could as well. But I do think it's between really those 2 guys. As you now get to the safety room here, this is where chef's kiss. You start with them in coverage. You get Minkah Fitzpatrick, one of the best overall safeties in the entire league. He's up there with Jesse Bates as like a top 5 safety in the NFL. Jesse Bates, my number 1, of course. Doesn't really have much of a compliment here in pass coverage. They're still the 14th best safety group in the league, and he's doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. Deshaun Elliott, the veteran, had a stint in Baltimore, Detroit, Miami. They have DeMonte Kazee here, and they have Miles Killebrew. There's going to be some competition here for who ends up being the safety next to Minkah Fitzpatrick in these passing situations. Now, Fitzpatrick's somebody that you can play anywhere in this defense. He's the defensive back version of TJ Watt, where you have to identify where he is and have a shift, have a call ready to adjust to where he is. You get them with the run support, they move up to the second best safety group in run support. This is where Deshaun Elliott really shines. I think this is where he gets really all of his playing time if he's healthy. This is a tremendous 1-2 punch. Second best in the whole league. Fitzpatrick's such a great overall player. Deshaun Elliott really shines in this role as like coming down, being that eighth man in the box. I think that there's possibilities on early downs. You could see him almost in the slot if they want to go just single high and stack the box that way. Be like that eighth man in the box type role for Deshaun Elliott. I really like that role for him. I think he can play it really well. Bringing that tenacity from that upbringing in with John Harbaugh's Baltimore Ravens, that mentality. I hope Patrick Queen brings it over as well. But just a great group. And this is, again, going to really help bail out the one issue this team really has on defense, which is the cornerback room. It's the only group that isn't like top 15 in the league. It's this cornerback room. You'd prefer it maybe the interior defensive line or the linebackers be that position group. But the potential of Joey Porter is through the roof. The athleticism of Dante Jackson and the upside that's going to bring with all those great parts surrounding him. It's just, there's a lot of optimism. And I think the optimism is justified from this defensive side of the ball, even with this extremely poor ranking for the corners. So overall, this is my 4th ranked defense in the league, 10th in pass defense and 4th against the run. Again, they lose out on being like that top 5 pass defense just because of the initial projection for the cornerback group. I think easily by the end of this season, this could be very well the number 1 defense in the entire league if that cornerback room ends up developing and growing the way that you would hope they would, especially with, again, all this great talent surrounding them. So this is overall my 10th ranked team in the league, 3rd coaching staff, tied for 27th offense, 4th ranked defense. Sort of the opposite problem that you saw with the LA Rams. Now, I did create a situation where if they get Brandon Aiyuk, they become the 8th ranked team in the NFL for me. 25th in total offense. Again, that bumps them up 2 whole overall spots for me to 8th. It would drop down my 9th ranked team to 10th, obviously, and my 8th ranked team to 9th, which you guys will see in the next day or so when I reveal them. And there you have it. My number 10 or number 8 team in my 2024 NFL Deep Dive series, the Pittsburgh Steelers. What do you guys think of the grades that I gave out? What do you think of the impact I have projected of them acquiring Brandon Aiyuk? Have they already acquired Brandon Aiyuk? Leave it in the comment section below. If they haven't, do you think that he would have an even bigger impact? Based upon my grading system, I don't know how you could have a bigger impact. But, you guys let me know in the comment section below. There's the rest of the series on either side of my head. Football season is almost here. The preseason's almost over. It's almost Labor Day, which means it's almost football. And I will see you guys with the next video next time.